Hey there, everyone. That sexy nerd is back again, and I thought I'd do something a little different. Not a little different, but whatever. I really love Harry Potter, as you guys know. Um, I have loved it ever since it came out. I read it was one of the first books I read by myself, because I was literally there, like grew up with these books. They even used to joke around and call me Harry Potter when I was a kid because I had these big spectacle glasses and whatever, and they're like, "Oh, you look like Harry Potter." I'm like, so that was fun. But when the movies came out, it just changed my life. I mean, like I remember it. It actually scared me a little bit. The whole Voldemort scene, when he comes out in the hood and everything. I was terrified of that for a good while, and like I just loved it. I've always loved these movies. They've always impressed me. Even the bad ones have impressed me. Sometimes with how bad they are, but that's a story for another day. But we're doing the Sorcerer's Stone today, and we're doing it for new Rockstars. And I'm really interested to see these Harry Potter videos because it's like an anniversary, isn't it? But yeah, I guess we'll find out. So why don't we just get started? And remember, please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe if you deserve it. And remember to sign up on Patreon for all my latest reactions to all my latest videos. Let's do this thing, y'all.
The first entry in our weekly Harry Potter rewatch series at New Rockstars. My family and I rewatch these films every holiday season, and growing up reading these books was the first world I truly geeked out in, with theories and clue hunting and just endless refreshing of the Leaky Cauldron website. So I am thrilled to revisit all 8 films of this series for Easter eggs, details you never spotted, connections to the book, and just interesting behind the scenes facts that make this series so timeless. And since HBO and Warner Brothers seem to be rebooting Harry Potter as a series on HBO, we're going to end each of these videos with a breakdown of what to get right. Like, what are they required to do now that they have a full season to adapt each of these books? We're calling it our room of requirement. Okay, here we go. Right off the bat, we see the Warner Brothers logo, which is the usual logo, but instead of the normal Warner Brothers theme playing, which is As Time Goes By, featured in the movie Casablanca, it plays the John Williams Harry Potter theme. So good. After this film, all of the subsequent movies had a stylized Harry Potter-ish design in the intro. But John Williams, after composing several iconic scores for several iconic franchises, had a high bar for Harry Potter and somehow was able to tap into the song that was in our heads that we didn't even realize. And now when you go back and watch these, it couldn't have been any other music for Harry Potter. The film opens on the street sign for Privet Drive with an owl perched on top, the first indication of some wizard activity. Lots of words in Harry Potter have obvious or not so obvious double meanings, as J.K. Rowling was trying to do some Dickensian wordplay. Like Privet Drive is a play on Private Drive, or Diagon Alley is designed diagonally. Director Chris Columbus wanted Privet Drive to look like an endless urban sprawl. When they walk down it in the film, you don't see an end to the street. It just slowly curves out of view to accentuate its size. He did this to highlight Harry's terrible situation in the cupboard and wanted it to look as expansive and soul-crushing as possible. The production went to great lengths to make each house of Privet Drive look like a cookie cutter, like an infinity mirror, right? Down to giving each family identical 1998 Vauxhall Vectras. Actually, after this film, the real homeowners requested more money to film there, so production painstakingly recreated the street at Levingston Film Studios. They felt this would ultimately be cheaper in the long run. As the owl flies off into the night, Albus Dumbledore appears out of nowhere, apparating, as we will later learn he did here. He's played in this film by Richard Harris, who took the role at his 11-year-old granddaughter's urging. Upon his death, right before the release of the Chamber of Secrets film, the role was recast for the 3rd film with Michael Gambon stepping in. Dumbledore uses a deluminator, also known as a put-outer, to extinguish the street lamps. This object comes back later in the series in an important way. Dumbledore spots Professor Minerva McGonagall, played by Dame Maggie Smith. McGonagall is an animagus, which means she can turn into an animal at will, in her case, a tabby cat. This cat apparently ran away during filming, only to reappear a few days later. In the books, any witch or wizard who can transform into an animal has to register with the Ministry of Magic so that they can keep track of who can turn into what. This is why later it's such a big deal that James Potter, Harry's father, along with Peter Pettigrew and Sirius Black, taught themselves to do it and are unregistered. Unregistered anime guy can go to Azkaban, the wizard prison, for doing this. Dumbledore and McGonagall hint around about what's just happened, but they leave a lot out. So at this point, Voldemort, he must not be named, has risen to power and has been wreaking havoc in the magical and non-magical communities, imprisoning and torturing people, murdering others, amassing followers. And earlier tonight, he went after James and Lily Potter and their baby, Harry. He managed to kill James and Lily, but Harry survived. And Voldemort somehow disappeared. All of these blanks will get filled in, the why, the how, etc. throughout this film and in the upcoming series. So when Dumbledore here says both the good and the bad rumors are true, he means the bad, that James and Lily are dead, and the good, that Voldemort seems to be gone, at least for now. Much later in the book series, it's established that James and Lily died on Halloween night. Now, in this neighborhood, there are not any Halloween decorations or late night trick-or-treaters, but honestly, the residents of Privet Drive seem like the type of people that would give out toothbrushes or inferior candy to kids, so that no kids would want to come to this neighborhood. So, it tracks. Like, there's some bratty HOA president who lives in this neighborhood who's like scaring away kids with a rake. Hagrid shows up with Harry on a flying motorcycle that he borrowed from Sirius Black. And obviously, we'll meet Sirius Black later in this franchise. Robin Williams reportedly really wanted to play the role of Hagrid, going so far as to say he'd do the role for no pay. He begged Chris Columbus, who he'd done a ton of movies with, like Miss Doubtfire and Bicentennial Man, but J.K. Rowling specifically wanted the cast to all be from the UK because she felt the film would feel more authentic if everyone could do their own natural accents. So the role ultimately went to Robbie Coltrane, who was the first actor cast. In real life, Robbie Coltrane is 6'1". In the film, they made him around 8 feet tall. In the books, Hagrid is actually 11 feet 6 inches and is half giant on his mother's side. For the film, they made Coltrane taller through a number of visual effects, mostly practical. You can see lots of examples of forced perspective, and they had special boots that added about an extra 7 inches to him. They also created 2 different sets in some scenes, for instance, a smaller and a larger version of his hut, so that when other characters stood in front of the set piece, it would look normal size, but when Hagrid stood in front, it would look much smaller. And as in Lord of the Rings, they used forced perspective and a layered fat suit. In some cases, they also used a 6'10" stand-in, Martin Bayfield, a former England international rugby player who also wore an animatronic head that looked like Robbie Coltrane. You can actually see that animatronic head a few times in the film, and it's kind of an unsettling uncanny valley thing when you do notice it. But it is cool how many practical effects there are throughout the film. Despite it being nominated for a BAFTA for Best Visual Effects, Columbus has said that he was never happy with them and that the VFX felt rushed. But it's so fun to see them get so clever with how to achieve certain things. And from watching these films to watching The Cursed Child play, the real magic comes in the practical magic and the sleight of hand techniques that they use. Now, Chris Columbus had a lot of experience working with kids from directing films like Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire, and he reportedly really wanted this job because he credited the Harry Potter books with teaching his daughter to learn to love reading. Before meeting with the producers, he put in a lot of work and asked to go last in the pitch meeting process after they had considered other directors like Steven Spielberg and Terry Gilliam. Columbus actually showed up to his meeting with producers with a spec script that he had written just to show them how serious he was. His passion and all the free work that he put into prep won everyone over, and he got the gig, which Terry Gilliam, as an Englishman, was not happy about. Gilliam was actually J.K. Rowling's first choice, and he had also wanted the gig very badly, but they apparently felt he didn't have enough experience working with child actors. Later in an interview, a very salty Gilliam stated, "I was a perfect guy to do Harry Potter. I remember leaving that meeting, getting in my car, and driving for about 2 hours along Mulholland Drive, just so angry. I mean, Chris Columbus's versions are terrible, just dull, pedestrian." And say what you will about these first 2 movies, they created a visual language that other, barely better movies in the franchise would build upon. So baby Harry Potter is left with the Dursleys. This baby was played by triplets, despite the fact that they're really just in it for this shot. It's always just easier with babies when you've got more than one of them to work. And if you happen to live in the LA area and you got twins and they're like vaguely cute, those kids are going to college. Now, McGonagall says that the Dursleys are the worst sort of muggles imaginable. A muggle is a non-magical person. In the books, Dumbledore had to send Harry here because only staying with a blood relative would be safe for him because of his mother's sacrifice to save him. It's blood magic. As long as he went home to the Dursleys every summer, that was still considered his home, and the blood magic would protect him. The envelope that Dumbledore leaves with the letter in it, explain everything, reads, "Mr. and Mrs. V. Dursley, 4 Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey." The lightning bolt-shaped scar on baby Harry's head turns into the title card of the movie, with thunder heard over it and storm clouds behind the title. Then we get the actual lightning flash over all of it. flipped. About 10 years later, Harry is relegated to living in the cupboard under the stairs at Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon's house, played perfectly by the awesome Fiona Shaw and Richard Griffiths. Set decorator Stephen McMillan said that he purposely picked out the ugliest furnishings he could find for the Dursleys' home to make it all as uncomfortable seeming as possible. There are photos of Harry's cousin Dudley and his parents everywhere, but there is not a single photo of Harry. This detail is straight from the books, and I love to see it in the living room here. Aunt Petunia is always embarrassed of, but secretly jealous of, her witch sister, and she and Vernon strive to be as normal and as non-remarkable as possible, which to them means neglecting and often ignoring Harry's existence. Now, these are actual baby photos of Harry Melling, who plays Dudley, and in years after this has gone on to be a very successful and very talented actor. The designers actually asked the Melling family to bring some in, and he later walked on set just to see them everywhere. I like the detail that the toys that Harry plays with are all broken with the head snapped off because these would be hand-me-downs from Dudley. On Dudley's birthday, they go to the zoo. Now, in the books, there's some other friends of Dudley's who go with them. I will admit, in the movie, it's just kind of weird to see the family just go and Harry's there with them. But on the way, Uncle Vernon warns Harry about any funny business, because in the books, odd, meaning magical things, happen around him all the time. Like he'll be running away from bullies and suddenly find himself on the roof, or Aunt Petunia cut all his hair off and it grew back the next morning, or just interesting looking people in weird robes will stop by and shake his hand. Harry does not know yet that he's magical, but his aunt and his uncle do, and they never speak of it or explain it to him. On the way into the zoo reptile house, they pass some local school kids in green and yellow uniforms. Probably just a coincidence, but green is a Slytherin color, and maybe the film is just kind of coding reptiles for us viewers so that we associate green school uniforms with, you know, the snake kids. Harry has this moment with the snake and vanishes the glass, and the snake slithers out, saying, "Thanks." Now in the book, the snake says a bit more than this. He goes, "Brazil, here I come. Thanks, amigo." Obviously, this is an important scene in Chamber of Secrets. It's revealed that the reason the snake understands Harry is because Harry Potter is a parcel mouth. Well, parcel mouth is the book's term for a speaker of parcel tongue, of course, the language of snakes. In the films, I believe they mostly just use the term parcel tongue for both the language and the speaker. Of course, Harry got this skill when Voldemort, who can also speak to snakes, attacked him and transferred some of his self and his powers to Harry. Of course, in Deathly Hallows, we will learn that's because Harry is himself a Horcrux. Later on, when Harry hands his uncle the mail, Vernon looks at a postcard and says, "Marge is ill. She ate a funny whelk." He's referring to his sister, who will show up in the third film. We'll see how Harry accidentally magically inflates her and she floats away. Now, in the background of the scene, you can see Aunt Petunia stirring a pot on the stove. It is not mentioned here, but Petunia is dyeing Dudley's old clothes to make Harry's school uniform for the school that they were planning to send Harry to. In the extended edition, Harry asks Petunia about these clothes before he gets the Hogwarts letter. Owls keep showing up, trying to deliver to Harry this Hogwarts entry letter. For the scenes with the owls, they needed one to look at Fiona Shaw. The owl kept looking at the moving camera instead, so they hung dead mice from her apron to make the owl stare at her. Vernon tries to keep Harry from getting his official letter from Hogwarts and eventually drags the whole family to a building in the middle of a small island. There's a whole section of the book that shows him driving all over town to try to get away from them, but this movie just goes straight to the island. Then Hagrid shows up, kicking down the door, and again we see some of this great practical magic of different size sets depending on which actor's standing in that shot, and he delivers this bomb.
"You're a wizard, Harry."
Now, he does not say "you're wizard Harry" in the books, but this is just one of many examples of how they had to condense especially exposition-heavy scenes for the film. When you read the book, this scene just reads as exposition, Hagrid just explaining things, and Harry going, "What's that? Why did he do that?" And it's very repetitive and does not make a very good scene, especially if you're reading aloud to your kid. And you can actually see J.K. Rowling get better as a writer as these books come out. Hagrid gives Harry his first proper birthday present that he's ever gotten, a birthday cake, and it is a mess. In the books, the Dursleys only ever gave Harry things like a pair of Uncle Vernon's old socks as gifts. The kindness from Hagrid is one of the many reasons Harry remains so loyal to him throughout the series. And while as wonderful of a gift this cake is, really the sweetest gift I think anybody could give Harry shows up in the books when Hagrid gives Harry a freaking scrapbook of images of his parents. God, that's heartbreaking. Now, Hagrid keeps his broken wand hidden inside of an umbrella, and he's not supposed to use it. We find out in Chamber of Secrets that this is because he was expelled from Hogwarts as a student and is not supposed to be using magic of any kind. The fact that Harry's clothes pre-Hogwarts are all so large for him is really on display in this scene, as he has a belt holding these big old pants up. He doesn't have any clothes of his own. Everything he wears is a hand-me-down from Dudley when they wear out or when just Dudley doesn't want them anymore. Truly, the Dursleys often go beyond negligent and veer straight into abusive territory, and this really just comes from J.K. Rowling writing especially these initial stories in the vein of the themes of Roald Dahl. in which Roald Dahl makes it clear that all British children are very unhappy. So Harry gets the letter from Hogwarts, and you can actually see the full visible text of the letter, reading as, "Dear Mr. Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Students shall be required to report to the Chamber of Reception upon arrival, the dates for which shall be duly advised. Please ensure that the utmost attention be made to the list of requirements attached here within." Hagrid uses his umbrella wand to give Dudley a piggy tail, and the book goes into the detail of the Dursleys having to have this surgically removed, and that's pretty messed up. I mean, the kid's only 11 years old. He's a very bad boy, but he's still a boy. So at this point in the book, Harry actually has to go back with the Dursleys, and it's a very awkward section where the Dursleys are just like clearly wanting to abuse him more. But at this point in the movie, Harry's just like, "See ya," and he leaves with Hagrid and never looks back. Harry and Hagrid approach the leaky cauldron. The sign for it goes from empty to filled in as they get close because it recognizes them as magic users. Muggles just pass on by, not even noticing. Inside, a lot of people already know who Harry is, including Tom, the barkeep, and Daedalus Diggle, both bigger characters in the book. And Harry meets Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, Professor Quirrell. And I love how you can actually see Quirrell in the very first wide shot of the pub, his head bowed down in the corner. Harry's scar only hurts him when he's looking directly at the back of Quirrell's head, since that's where it turns out Voldemort is. So right now, Quirrell isn't setting off any alarm bells. Quirrell also doesn't shake Harry's hands, which the audience just chalks up to him being a weirdo, maybe a germaphobe, but it's really because had he shaken Harry's hand, he'd have found that Harry's touch burns him because of the magic given to Harry by his mother's sacrifice. Quirrell is actually in Diagon Alley that day because he's gonna try and steal the Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone from Gringotts later. Also, the menu board of the Leaky Cauldron includes a reference to the classic Monty Python spam sketch, just with a repetitive wordplay there. Now, as they venture into Diagon Alley, a very cool detail of these scenes is that notice all the set designers designed Diagon Alley to have no straight lines because it's diagonally. And also just Wizard World has to look different from our world. Harry and Hagrid go to Gringotts, the wizarding bank run by goblins. Now, the main goblin bank teller is played by Warwick Davis, who also plays Professor Flitwick and does the voice of Griphook, the goblin that takes them to the vault. Griphook was actually played by Vern Troyer, but because of J.K. Rowling's No Americans rule, his lines were dubbed over by Warwick Davis. Harry's vault number is 687. The vault that Hagrid goes to for Dumbledore is vault 713. Griphook opens the vault by running his finger over the front of the vault door. In the book, anyone else who tried that would be sucked inside and trapped there, and the goblins only check the vaults for intruders once a decade. So you know, a lot of these vaults are filled with the corpses of dead thieves. Harry and Hagrid walk by the office of the Daily Prophet. That's the Wizarding World's main newspaper. Harry goes to get a wand at Ollivander's. The sign reads, "Makers of fine wands since 382 BC. Ollivander's at Universal Studios has a sign exactly like this. Actually, walking down Diagon Alley there is really cool. You can get a butterbeer or pick out a wand, and they have a lot of flourishes from the movie itself. Just don't go in the middle of summer where it's 112 degrees out, or this number in Celsius, because it kind of ruins the illusion of the snow-topped British stores. Vander is played amazingly by John Hurt, another legend in a number of films, including that guy in Alien. He says he can remember every wand he's ever sold. Each wand is made of wood from a certain tree and a core, which is either a phoenix feather, a dragon heartstring, or the hair of a unicorn tail. The wand Harry gets has the same core as Voldemort's wand, which becomes a very important plot point later on in the films. And Hagrid also gives Harry Hedwig, who's played by 3 different owls throughout the film. When Hagrid tells Harry about the night his parents died, the flashback sequence was written by J.K. Rowling because at this point, while the stories were developing, she was the only one who knew what actually happened that night. When this film was released, the first 4 books in the eventual 7-book series had already been published. These were Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone, 1997, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, published in 1998, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, published in 1999, and Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, published in 2000. But it is important for us to consider the timeline between Rowling's book writing and the development and production of the films. These first 2 films were written, developed, and shot and released during the 3-year gap in Rowling's writing after Goblet of Fire was published, as Rowling was writing Order of the Phoenix and really just figuring out the general endgame of her book series. And the release and reception of the first 2 movies almost certainly affected Rowling's ideas for Order of the Phoenix onward, and how expansive her world building and lore became in the latter 3 books. The first 4 books read like self-contained mysteries in a fantasy world, and the last 3 books attempt to mature into YA high fantasy, embracing some darker themes with inner politics and history and prophecy. When we watch these early films, it was really Richard Harris's performance as Dumbledore as an aloof old man filled with secrets and regret that I believe prodded Rowling in developing his and Harry's relationship in book 5, as well as things like Matthew Lewis's standout performance as Neville, and the movie ending with his bonus 10 points that won the House Cup for Gryffindor and made this character seem more important than structurally similar characters like Seamus or Dean, while Rowling was writing book 5 and suddenly gave Neville such great importance in the Order of the Phoenix book, as well as things like the charm and dynamic among the 3 core actors that affected Rowling's writing of the conflict in book 7 and her infamous decision to keep Ron alive in book 7 despite her original plan to kill the character off.
But I think in my absolute heart of hearts, although I did seriously consider killing Ron.
But we must take a moment to address the elephant in the room. Yes, J.K. Rowling has said many horrible things online and sadly continues to target and harass members of oppressed groups who are especially vulnerable right now. That is horrible, and we condemn these statements. Our decision to break down these 8 films is not meant to excuse Rowling's behavior. Rowling is not going to make any money from us making these videos. The Harry Potter franchise remains an enormously popular series of books and films and games and theatrical and parks experiences and online communities that mean so much to millions of people in spite of what Rowling has done. And all these millions of people are going to continue to love this franchise and rewatch these films, whether or not we make these videos about them. It is our mission to analyze the films that we love and to enrich that love with a fuller context of how things are made. And we cannot give that context if we pretend these things don't exist. It really goes beyond us separating the art from the artist, as we all do all the time, consciously or unconsciously. In these videos, we are going to talk a lot about the artists, all of the artists, because these movies do not just reflect the mind of one author alone and her online behavior years after these stories came out. They are really the collective achievements that represent the artistry of thousands of voices from the late 90s and early aughts who all loved something and changed our lives. Harry Potter remains a core element in what it means for many of us to be a nerdy fan of anything. I would not have the career that I have without reading these stories and watching these films as a kid. We can and should condemn Rowling's behavior while we can and should relive these beautiful, wonderful things made by filmmakers inspired by her books. And my hope by making this statement in the middle of a video, clicked on by a lot of you who probably unabashedly love Harry Potter free from the drama, is that you do take a moment to contextualize what the author is doing and to consider how best to comfort the afflicted with your time and your resources. And we included a list of wonderful organizations to donate to in the description below. And if thinking about Rowling does make you feel weird, that's okay. Part of being a grown-up means that you have to hold multiple true things in your head at the same time. Okay, back to the breakdown. Harry's train ticket reads London to Hogwarts for one-way travel, platform 9 3/4, insured subject to the rules and regulations of Hogwarts Express Railway authorities. We meet the Weasley family, who are also on the platform to catch the train. Mrs. Weasley, Percy, the twins Fred and George, Ron and Ginny, who will not go to Hogwarts until next year. Mrs. Weasley keeps loudly shouting about muggles.
Packed with muggles, of course. Come on. Platform 9 3/4 this way.
And really not trying to keep magic a secret or hidden at all on this crowded platform, but it's really just meant to be a commentary on how muggles are just not very observant. Fred and George deliberately try to confuse their mom.
He's not Fred, I am. Honestly, woman, you call yourself our mother.
But you can see that their correct initials are on their footlockers. As Harry enters the platform, one of the first families he sees is Neville Longbottom with Augusta Longbottom. As we learn later in the series, of course, Neville shares Harry's birthday and was thought by Voldemort and others to be a possible candidate for the chosen one in the prophecy. That's why it's his grandmother escorting him and not his parents, whom my wife and I are sure to specify every time we read a mention of Neville in the early books were tortured to the point of insanity. On the train, Ron and Harry eat all the candy from the trolley, and on Ron's lap is Scabbers, his pet rat.
This is Scabbers, by the way.
In hindsight, this is super freaking weird and creepy, since it turns out Scabbers is actually Peter Pettigrew, a full-grown ass man sitting in the crotch of a child. When the film came out, the book where this is revealed, the 3rd book, Prisoner of Azkaban, had already been released, so it seems like someone should have said, hey, that rat is actually a man, so let's not have him nosing around an 11-year-old's crotch. But yeah, right now, Ron and Harry just think of Scabbers as an ordinary old rat. The dumb fake spell that Ron's brothers gave him to turn Scabbers' tail yellow wouldn't have worked either way.
Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow. Turn this stupid fat rat yellow.
Because, you know, Scabbers isn't a rat, he's an animagus. Harry and Ron meet Hermione Granger, who's looking for Neville's toad. Interestingly, most of the scenes with Harry, Ron, and Hermione in them were filmed chronologically, with a couple exceptions. The final scene where they're headed home at the Hogwarts train station was actually filmed first. I kind of wonder if Chris Columbus might have did this because he was worried that the kids would look and sound older over several months of shooting, so he wanted that to be less conspicuous. There are some bits of dialogue where they went back and re-recorded it using ADR, where especially Daniel Radcliffe Radcliffe's voice does sound deeper in this movie, most notably when he's yelling to Uncle Vernon about his letters as the first are pouring into the house.
Let go of me!
Filming the trio was actually pretty difficult because the actors were so young and inexperienced. Rupert Grint and Emma Watson had never been on a film set before. Chris Columbus said that he never knew when they were going to deliver the performance I wanted, so this first movie has a lot of cuts during the trio scenes because their performances were just a bit inconsistent. Because of this movie was also shot with just a lot of cameras, and Columbus compared it to when shooting a documentary with how much coverage he felt he needed. The kids arrive on the train in Hogsmeade.
Right then, first years, this way, please.
That's the Wizarding Village near Hogwarts that's featured in a lot of the later films. From there, the first year students get to Hogwarts by magic boats that move by themselves. Each grade arrives in a different way as they progress, and we get our first shot of the Hogwarts castle, and it just looks glorious. The design of Hogwarts, both the exterior and interior, actually changes throughout the films. Stuart Craig was the production designer for all the films. He says he feels he ultimately failed with Hogwarts exterior in this movie because it doesn't have the iconic silhouette and looks too busy. I completely disagree. I think it looks awesome here, but artists are always hardest on themselves. He would tinker with the design throughout the movies, improving on the silhouette and changing the campus more and more to his liking. McGonagall runs through each of the houses, a bit more on each one. Gryffindor is depicted by a lion. Its colors are red and gold. The students in this house are known for their bravery. Hufflepuff, the badger, yellow and black colors, known for loyalty, also just being rejects from the other houses. Ravenclaw is an eagle, blue and bronze, known for intelligence. And finally, Slytherin, a snake, green and silver, known for its ambition and evil. A lot of evil wizards come out of the Slytherin house, and I love that Maggie Smith gives a pause before Slytherin and puts some stink on the name.
Ravenclaw and Slytherin.
And then shoots a look at Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle. She already knows what house those little shits are gonna be in. Snape later gives Malfoy a similarly pointed look, but that time it's because he's into it. Snape, of course, is the head of Slytherin house. In the book, McGonagall is head of Gryffindor house, and she and Snape have a huge rivalry every year over who is gonna beat who at Quidditch and who's gonna win the cup at the end of the year. I guess Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw are never really in the mix. At the start of the year, Slytherin has beaten Gryffindor in Quidditch 6 years in the running. This, of course, at the top of the stairs is a moment where Harry meets Malfoy.
Harry Potter has come to Hogwarts.
And I just like to think that Harry probably wouldn't have had a problem with Malfoy had Malfoy not directly insulted the one kid who sat with him the whole train ride up here.
Red hair and a hand-me-down robe. You must be a Weasley.
Like, Malfoy could have been a snob and might have ended up being sort of friends with Harry, but Harry's like, no, I see how you treat others. Kissing my ass ain't gonna help.
I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks.
Also, like in the background of this handshake scene that's at the top of the Oxford stairs there's totally kids just looking directly in the camera. Always freaks me out, but there's a lot of kids in this movie, and anytime you have kids in the movie, some of them are gonna be looking right at the camera. For this first film, the floating candles in the Great Hall were a practical effect. They used candle-shaped holders with oil and wicks and attached them to wires that moved up and down to make it seem like they were floating. But a few of the wires got too hot and started snapping, so to prevent flaming candles falling on kids' heads, they started to use CGI in subsequent films. Hogwarts has about 900 kids enrolled there, according to the books, but when designing the Great Hall, they found it was impractical to make the room big enough to fit the entire student body. The one in the film, which is the Oxford Campus Dining Hall, can fit about 400 kids in it. It's also just interesting to think about the total number of the kids in the class. It's not a lot of kids per class. 4 houses. Harry's only one of 5 first-year boys, the others being Ron, Neville, Dean, and Seamus, and there's only like 5 first-year girls, which makes 70 kids per house. So that's 10 years per grade, 7 grades. So that's 70 kids per house, 4 houses, that's 280 kids. So I don't know how they got 900 out of 280, but maybe some class sizes were bigger, which would also make it pretty unfair if people are trying to recruit kids for Quidditch Cup or just house cups, some houses having more kids than others. Hey, look, they don't teach math at Hogwarts. Wizards are just bad with math. J.K. Rowling also said that in the books, the kids don't wear uniforms, though they do have robes.
First year students will require 3 sets of plain work robes.
They screen tested a lot of different looks for the kids, but ultimately went with the uniforms because it looked more cohesive on screen. Dumbledore makes the announcements and introductions. He says that they're not to enter the Dark Forest.
The first years, please note that the Dark Forest is strictly forbidden to all students.
In the book, it's actually called the Forbidden Forest. Filch is played by David Bradley, who most notably plays the original version of the Doctor in Doctor Who, who was first played by William Hartnell. And of course, David Bradley will have a great role in Game of Thrones.
That's what I say.
And we need the sorting hat.
And you will be sorted into your houses.
The
Fuck
voice
you,
actor of the
Filch.
Sorting Hat is Leslie Phillips, another British actor who's been in a ton of things, mostly in supporting roles, but you would definitely recognize him. The Hat sorts Hermione into Gryffindor.
Gryffindor!
In the book, she later tells Ron and Harry that the Hat seriously considered putting her in Ravenclaw. It's interesting here in the movie, they kind of just go randomly by last name, but in the book, they go alphabetically by last name. Hannah Abbott is the first one to get sorted. Of course, the Hat immediately sorts Malfoy into Slytherin.
Slytherin!
I love that Hat touches like one of his hairs. It's like, get him away from me. A lot of the fans over the years have wondered why Hogwarts doesn't just kick all the Slytherins out or just like flag them or something, you know, keep an eye on them. But friends, I guess that would be called profiling.
And profiling is wrong.
You can't just kick out every Slytherin because some of them have been assholes or mass murderers over the years. Now, while they're sitting at the tables, Harry spots Severus Snape, the late great Alan Rickman. Like a lot of the older actors, Alan Rickman was talked into doing the role by younger members of his family. In this case, his nieces, nephews, and godchildren. Harry's scar starts hurting, which he thinks later means Snape is evil, but directly to the right of Snape, Quirrell has his back turned to Harry, so Harry is actually looking at the face of Voldemort. Just another way the film misleads the audience on the Voldemort Quirrell reveal. Susan Bones is played by Chris Columbus's daughter, Eleanor. He puts her in all of his movies. She wasn't allowed to speak though because of Rowling's no non-UK actors rule. She only agreed to let Eleanor be in it at all because Eleanor was kind of like Christopher Columbus's director's signature. And, you know, John Williams really just scores Susan with just some sweet music.
Susan Bones.
When Harry puts the Sorting Hat on, it speaks to him.
Very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see.
In the book, it's made more clear that the person wearing the hat hears its voice in his head, not out loud. No one else knows what the hat is saying to them.
Let the feast begin.
Now, a little detail here, most of the food in the feast scenes is made from resin, but some of it was real. So the cast could kind of grab some of it and really chow down. Every witch and wizard at Hogwarts must have the highest cholesterol ever, unless there's a spell for that. John Cleese shows up as the ghost, nearly headless Nick.
Welcome to Gryffindor.
Each house has its own ghost, and he's the ghost of Gryffindor. The other ghosts are the Grey Lady, she's the ghost of Ravenclaw, the Bloody Baron of Slytherin, and the Fat Friar of Hufflepuff. And as we will learn in Deathly Hallows, the Grey Lady and the Bloody Baron have a whole history. Though we don't see it here, Bloody Baron's just kind of going through the Slytherin table and going, ha 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 ha, like a crazy one. Now in the books, there are way more ghosts at Hogwarts, but these are just the ones that we meet and focus on. There's also the havoc-wreaking poltergeist named Peeves, and Peeves was actually cast for this film and shot a number of scenes, but ultimately the filmmakers felt his scenes didn't work and he was cut, which was a very controversial decision among the fans since he was something of a favorite from the books. Now the moving staircases included one real staircase and a tiny model of others post-production. The actors stood on this single moving one to film scenes and the rest were sweeping views of the model. Now while the staircases are not described to move like this in the books per se, there is a passage that suggests things like this did happen at Hogwarts. Quote, there were 142 staircases at Hogwarts, wide sweeping ones, narrow rickety ones, and some that led somewhere different on a Friday, some with a vanishing step halfway up that you had to remember to jump. Then there were doors that wouldn't open unless you asked politely or tickled them in exactly the right place, and doors that weren't really doors at all, but solid walls just pretending. It was also very hard to remember where anything was because it all seemed to move around a lot. And these doors that weren't really doors at all, probably an unknowing reference to what would later be established as the room of requirement. Now, a lot of the paintings there at Hogwarts were done by Stuart Craig, the production designer. There's a mix of real paintings and green screens replaced by moving images in post-production. A lot of the people in these paintings are producers and others who worked on the films, like Stuart Craig based one of these paintings on his own likeness. So we end up going through the routine of the different classes. We actually see a shot of McGonagall leaping from cat form into human form in camera, and the VFX transition is pretty good. But I just like that before Minerva reveals herself, the students in the class who were sitting there were like, oh, I guess a cat is teaching this class, and they were so afraid of Mrs. Norris.
It's Filch's cat. Ron.
I guess they wouldn't doubt it. Potions class sets up Snape as the villain again, so that the ending will come as a surprise. Snape's wardrobe is the only one that doesn't change throughout all of the films. The costume designer thought she nailed it and didn't need changing, and I agree. Rickman is clearly having a lot of fun with this character as he sneers at Harry every chance he gets. He actually wore black contact lenses for these films to cover up his light brown eyes and be more book accurate. Snape humiliates Harry by quizzing him with potions knowledge that would be impossible for a first year raised in a Muggle household to know.
Tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? You don't know? Well, let's try again. Where, Mr. Potter, would you look if I asked you to find me a bezoar? And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfbane?
Hermione knows the answers to all 3 questions, but that bezoar mentioned should catch your ear. It is the item that will save Ron's life when he gets poisoned in Half-Blood Prince. Seamus Finnegan tries to turn water into rum. Why is an 11-year-old trying to make rum on a school day morning? Seems like an Irish stereotype to me, but the kid clearly didn't get his wand from Ollivander because it is defective, my dude. It keeps blowing crap up. Neville, meanwhile, receives a Remember-All in the mail, which turns red.
The only problem is, I can't remember what I've forgotten.
I always assumed he forgot where he placed his house robes because most of the others are wearing robes and he's just kind of rocking the sweater. His parents' Remember-Alls would always turn red, most likely because their brains were melted after they were tortured to the point of insanity. The mail arrives via Owl and Harry discovers that someone broke into Gringotts and tried to rob the vaults that Hagrid took the package out of, Vault 713. Madam Hooch gives the students their first flying lesson. Now, there's been a long debated mystery over Hooch's yellow hawk-like eyes, some thinking she is an animagus, others a metamorphagus. Maybe she's just cursed. Really, I just like to think that they made the Hexenbesson coach bird-like. The students summon their broomsticks. Harry's and Malfoy's zip right up into their hands upon saying up, while Hermione and Ron's have more trouble. My theory is that both Harry and Malfoy's brooms hate each other and are eager to get into the hands of their riders so that they can show off against each other. Neville takes off by accident, and a very 2001 CGI version of this kid gets tossed around until he falls, but Chris Columbus was clever about how he staged it by using the crowd of kids to mask where the actor would already be laying on the ground. Malfoy snatches Neville's Remember-All and Harry stands up to him, proving himself to be a natural flyer. He catches it right in front of Minerva, and as he floats back down, there's some clever camera work as we crane down on him from behind, but don't actually have to show the actor floating with wires. In the background of the shot, you can still see poor Neville's robes hanging from the scaffolding. Now, McGonagall seems pretty salty about this, and it looks like Harry's going to be killed, or worse,
expelled.
But instead, she takes him to meet Oliver Wood, taking him out of, Defense Against the Dark Arts class, which gives us another glance of Quirrell, who acts like he's having trouble with that reptile, but you know, with that creepy face on the back of his head that's hidden, has total control of the situation. Harry is recruited to be the Seeker for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, the youngest in a century. The Gryffindor Quidditch plaque has Harry's dad's name on it, Seeker James Potter 1972, and M. McGonagall 1971, and then on the left, R.J.H. King 1969. So Minerva McGonagall was a teacher by the 1970s. She was a student in the late 40s and 50s. So it's believed this could be one of her nieces or nephews who played alongside James, or maybe it's just a movie gaffe. According to Minerva's Wizarding World profile, Minerva played for a Gryffindor Quidditch team in her student years in which she proved to be gifted. However, she suffered a nasty fall in her final year, a foul during the Gryffindor versus Slytherin match, which would decide the Quidditch Cup winner. This event left her with a concussion, several broken ribs, and a lifelong desire to see Slytherin crushed on the Quidditch pitch. Now, the Crimes of Grindelwald film does some crazy stuff with Minerva's timeline, establishing that she was a teacher in the 1920s, despite rolling herself writing that screenplay for that film. It really makes no sense, and we shall ignore it. I just like this detail for establishing that the McGonagalls were families of Quidditch players along with the Potters, and that's why McGonagall was so thrilled that Harry was a natural seeker. Now, R.J.H. King is a reference to John King, the supervising art director on the film. To the right of the Quidditch plaque is another plaque reading, "For special service to Hogwarts." There isn't a name seen on the plaque, but it's confirmed to be a deleted scene from the second film in which this plaque says Tom Riddle, Voldemort's real name. Harry, Ron, and Hermione find themselves on the off-limits third floor and come face to face with Fluffy, the three-headed dog. To make him look even more real, the effects team made sure that each head moved independently of the others and had their own distinct personalities. Fluffy's appearance is based on the Staffordshire Bull Terrier. Obviously, since he's guarding something and has 3 heads, this is a nod to Cerberus, Hades' 3-headed dog that guarded the gates of the underworld in Greek mythology. So Oliver Wood teaches Harry the basics of Quidditch, but you know, they kind of brush past a lot of the rules. So if you just watch the movie and then later go back to read the books, you'd be like, wait, how does Quidditch work exactly? Here's a breakdown. Each team has 7 players. There are 3 goals at each end of the pitch, and each goal scored is worth 10 points. The 3 chasers on each team are the ones trying to score those goals with the quaffle. That's the ball that you score with. Each team has a keeper, basically a goalie, trying to protect the goals. Each team also has 2 beaters who try to hit the 2 bludgers in play at the other players to knock them off their brooms. Then finally, there is the seeker. That's Harry's position. Their job is to locate and catch the golden snitch, which is the tiny golden flying ball.
I always thought that the bludgers were trying to score with the other balls in there, but I guess I don't know the rules of Quidditch.
the snitch is caught, the game is over. The snitch is worth 150 points for whichever team catches it. So the seeker has to make sure that 150 points is enough for them to win the game. If, say, the other team's chasers have scored 200 points worth of goals and your team has won 0 points, if the team with 0 points catches a snitch, they still lose because the score would be 150 to 200. That rarely happens, but it has happened a few times in Wizarding history. Meanwhile, the game does not end until the snitch is found, and the lore details historical games of Quidditch that have gone on for a very long time. A fun little detail here, when the snitch flies off of Harry's hand, while Wood looks around confused, Harry's eyes stay locked on, showing how he is a natural seeker. In reality, I'm sure Chris Columbus just told this actor Sean Biggerstaff to just kind of look around confused without any VFX reference point to lock onto. In Charms class, Professor Flitwick, Warwick Davis, teaches the students the Wingardium Leviosa levitation spell. None of the kids are getting it quite right until Hermione performs it perfectly and levitates her feather. As Hermione lectures the others, it's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
It's Leviosa.
But Ron is a huge dick about this and makes fun of Hermione for being a know-it-all when she was just trying to help him. She overhears him and runs to the bathroom to cry, which is what ends up putting her in danger from the rogue troll. Later, Ron, with some more coaching from Hermione on the switch and flick maneuver, will redeem himself by using the spell to levitate the Trolls Club and knock out the troll. The spell comes back a whole bunch of times throughout the books, which is fitting since it's the first real practical spell the students learn. Like in Chamber of Secrets, Harry uses the spell to levitate the cupcakes filled with a sleeping draft in front of Crabbe and Goyle to basically roofie these two boys and steal their identities. Harry uses Wingardium Leviosa again in Order of the Phoenix to protect himself from some brains attacking in the Department of Mysteries. And Ron gets to be the hero again in the final book when he uses it to levitate a stick to deactivate the Whomping Willow so that he, Ron, and Hermione can get to the Shrieking Shack fast during the Battle of Hogwarts. It's now Halloween time at Hogwarts, and it is awesome. Floating jack-o'-lanterns everywhere, cakes and candies. Harry and Ron go to find Hermione when Quirrell runs in shouting that a troll in the dungeon.
Thought you ought to know.
And like a big, dumb, oafish perv, this troll heads straight for the girls' bathroom. The troll itself is one of those CGI moments that some people might think looks a little outdated now, but the way they made this scene come to life is actually pretty impressive. The troll wasn't purely CGI, it was a mix of digital and practical, like a lot of stuff in these early films. Full-sized hands and legs were created and puppeted by puppeteers so that the actors could have something to work against, and a small full model of the troll was created for static close-ups. The troll snot was also very real.
Troll bogies.
Again, by today's standards, it's not super smooth, but the scene is fast-paced and chaotic, so watching it as a kid, you don't really notice certain things. Like Harry switches from real to CGI depending on how he's interacting with the troll, like when he's on the troll's shoulders, and you can tell in close-up that the shoes and legs are CGI to make it look more smooth with the CGI troll. When he's hanging upside down, it's pretty obvious that in wide shots when both he and the troll interacting and can both be seen, that's CGI Harry, but when they switch to the close-ups, it's real Daniel Radcliffe being manipulated in the scene practically, including being suspended upside down. When the sink explodes right next to Hermione, that is a real effect and lets the audience feel her terror that she could be crushed at any second. So after they bring the troll down, they swap in a real-life troll prop so that incapacitated thing looks very real. Harry sees a cut on Snape's leg and assumes he let the troll in as a diversion and then tried to get by Fluffy in the ensuing chaos. Harry puts two and two together and realizes Fluffy's guarding whatever Hagrid took out of Vault 713. Before the big Quidditch match, Harry gets a brand new Nimbus 2000 riding broomstick that the kids in Diagon Alley were admiring earlier. The fact that the kids can't immediately tell that this is a broomstick that the owl delivered under the packaging is kind of wild. Like, look at the shape of it. It's like when people bring wine to White Elephant and wrap it. Like, what else would I think a wine-shaped bottle is? Now, interesting here, when Severus Snape wishes Harry good luck on the Quidditch match against Slytherin, and in the moment, it kind of seems like this might be said sarcastically with a bit of a sneer, something to ice this kid, psych him out, get in his head. And while it can definitely be read that way, I think it takes on a different meaning when looked back upon at the end of the series. Because Snape is one of the most complex characters in all of this lore. He's loved Lily Potter for all these years, even after her death, and Harry has her eyes, and Snape took it upon himself to protect Lily's son because of the role he played in her death. But he also has always deeply hated James, whom Harry bears a striking resemblance to, especially from a distance. And Snape does genuinely seem to think Harry has a lot of his dad's qualities. Snape saves Harry's life many times over the course of the story, but his feelings toward him him are so muddy that even he himself probably doesn't understand them. So maybe this began as Snape genuinely trying to wish him good luck on the match, seeing the brightness of Lily's eyes. But then when refocusing his eyes on the rest of Harry's face, he was like, actually, you know what? I do actually kind of hate you. Either way, it's definitely a bit of backhanded shit talk since he has this Quidditch rivalry with McGonagall. In the stands of the match, Tom Felton's grandfather, geophysicist Nigel Anstey.
You know, honestly, it always seemed like he was still protecting him regardless. And even from just having it just take all the other movies out and just the first movie, I always thought of it as, you know, he genuinely respected him and was kind of, you know, happy with his accomplishment, you know. But yeah, obviously that kind of compliment didn't help, but still, he wasn't bad in the end of that movie. And it's really weird, right? Have you guys ever noticed the fact that basically it's the Deathly Hallows is just a remake, at least from the end, is a remake of the first movie. It's kind of weird.
Steve plays an uncredited extra sitting next to the announcer Lee Jordan. He's in a few other scenes throughout the movie. He's sitting at the big table with the teachers in the Great Hall. These Quidditch matches were shot by a different unit than for the main film, and it dragged on several months after principal photography had otherwise wrapped. Columbus said that if he could redo anything, he would want to give the team more time to do this sequence, as he's never been happy with the special effects. The Quidditch scene was also apparently the first time a scene had been fully pre-visualized by 3D animation first, and they shot everything to fit that animation. This is a relatively common practice now. Just to break down the lineup of the two teams, Gryffindor has Angelina Johnson, Alicia Spinnet, and Katie Bell. They're the three chasers. Fred and George Weasley are the two beaters. Oliver Wood is the team captain and the keeper. Harry's the seeker. Slytherin is led by Marcus Flint, captain and chaser. In the book, Harry describes him as looking as he had some troll blood in him. Adrian Pusey is another chaser. The third chaser is unidentified. In the books, it's implied that it's Graham Montague who becomes captain after Flint graduates, but in the film, there's a girl. There are two unidentified beaters, but again, in the books, it's implied that these are Peregrine Derrick and Lucian Bowl, who are identified in later books as being on the team, but there's another girl here, so maybe she's one of them. Yikes! In the book, Miles Bletchley is the keeper, and you do hear his name here from Lee Jordan's commentary.
Bletchley passes to Captain Marcus Flint.
But the actor playing the keeper is a girl, so I'm not sure who this is. And then Terrence Higgs is the seeker. I think the filmmakers might have added a couple girls to the Slytherin team just because they didn't know who some of them were. Gryffindor has a faster and much more skilled team. Slytherin always goes for brute strength over skill, so they often just pick the biggest, most aggressive guys. In the books, they're the only house to typically go for an all-male team, again, favoring size and strength over all else. They're also not afraid to cheat and often get called out for fouls. Once Harry joins Gryffindor, Wood says that it's the best team they've had in years. Now, at the start of the match, Harry and Higgs take a high position to better look for the snitch. Some of these characters get recast when they have more to do in later films, but after the kickoff, Angelina Johnson grabs a quaffle and immediately scores, winning Gryffindor 10 points. Slytherin gets the ball and Bletchley passes to Flint. The Gryffindor chasers try to stop him, and he kicks Angelina Johnson out of the way, but Wood defends the goal, serving a look to Flint that says, "That's what you get for kicking my chaser, dick." Bell and Spinnet have a series of fancy passes, and one of them scores, making the score 20-0. A Slytherin chaser elbow checks a Gryffindor chaser, but once again, Wood stops him from scoring. Flint grabs one of the beaters' bats and smacks a bludger straight at Wood, taking him out of the game long enough for Slytherin to score. Then he and another teammate box Angelina in and cause her to fly off into the stands. Slytherin scores again on the unguarded goal, tying up the game. We get a real good look at the different team styles throughout this game. Slytherin only manages to score after literally kicking the crap out of people, whereas Gryffindor uses teamwork and like a Mighty Ducks Flying V configuration to get the job done. The score is frenetic and fast-paced and eventually triumphant, but Harry spots a snitch and could end the game right there if his broomstick didn't start bucking him around. As Hermione focuses on Snape and thinks he's the one bewitching Harry's broomstick, right before that moment, you can see Quirrell also looking intently at Harry and quietly muttering, since he's the one actually doing it. And then when Hermione lights Snape's cloak on fire, the spell actually stops because Snape accidentally knocks Quirrell backwards into the stands, breaking his eye contact so that he cannot continue to perform the spell. Harry gets back on his unjinxed broom and battles it out with Higgs to get to the snitch first. They both go into the dive, but Higgs chickens out and pulls up first, while Harry dives for the snitch, trips, and catches it in his mouth. Now, snitches have something called flesh memory, which means they remember the first person to touch them. This is also to prevent disputes in tournament experiment games. If two seekers touch the snitch, it can identify which of them really touched it first. But this fact and how Harry catches the snitch here come back in a big way in the final book, when Dumbledore enchants the same snitch with a secret message for Harry that can only be read when he touches his mouth to it. Eye open at the close. Hagrid, it turns out, should never be trusted with information about anything.
What that dog is guarding is strictly between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. I should not have said that. I bought him off an Irish feller I met down the pub last year.
Shouldn't have said
then
that.
I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the...
Yes?
Shouldn't have said that.
It's now Christmas time. Harry and Ron stay at Hogwarts and play wizard's chess, setting up the life-size game in the third act. Actually, if you look closely, Harry sacrifices his knight to Ron's queen. This is what Ron does in the big match later, using Harry's move from this Christmas match, as he will know that Harry will see where he's going, and that's why Harry's a step ahead of Hermione. And that whole scene where he's like, when I make my move, the queen will take me, and then you're free to check the king. No, Ron, no. What is it? He's going to sacrifice. No, you can't. Do you want Snape to get the stone or not? Look, Harry, it's you who's got to make it through. I know it. Not me, not Hermione, you. Ron mentions that his parents are going to visit his brother Charlie. Charlie is the only Weasley sibling that doesn't show up in the films other than a cameo in a photograph. On Christmas morning, Harry is surprised to discover that he has actual presents.
It's got presents. Yeah.
Because, you know, his aunt and uncle weren't going to send him anything. In the book, Ron tells his mother that Harry is worried he won't get presents, so she sends him a hand-knitted sweater that she makes for all of her kids. Ron's is maroon, a color he absolutely hates. Now, this movie only hints at the fact that Dumbledore was the one who gave Harry the invisibility cloak, but in the book, it's stated outright that Harry's dad gave it to Dumbledore to give to Harry, and Dumbledore passes it along to Harry specifically so that he can sneak around the castle and figure stuff out and play detective and get into some trouble. It's later revealed that the invisibility cloak, which is better and more effective than any of the ones Ron has ever seen or heard of, is one of the Deathly Hallows, rumored to be cut from Death's very own cloak, now in the hands of a child. When he's under this cloak, Harry overhears Snape.
You don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell.
What do you mean?
You know perfectly well what I mean.
Again, Harry just takes the wrong meaning from all of this. Although it's hard to blame him with this put on stutter, Quirrell seems petrified of the perfectly calm and collected Snape. Now, Snape turns his head as if he knows someone is there under the invisibility cloak, even going so far as to reach out, and Harry frantically backs away. Now, Snape may have heard Harry's frantic breathing or his heartbeat or his footsteps, but I like the idea that this cloak could have a bit of sense memory with Severus, like the specific sound of the cloth as it brushes against itself, or a smell perhaps, or maybe just a vibe. This would be some cloth that Snape would be familiar with from all the times that James and his buddies would wear it around Hogwarts back in the day to humiliate him. And if you were bullied as much as Severus was using this specific item, that is a type of sense memory that would always stay with him. Probably caused him to have a little miniature panic attack. It's like that teacher in The Sixth Sense when Cole starts to call him Stuttering Stanley. That is just something that you never grow out of as an adult teacher. Harry discovers the mirror of Erised. Erised backwards, of course, is desire, how it would be read in a mirror's reflection. Across the top of this mirror is engraved Erised stra eru oit ub kafru oit on wosi. Or again, reflected backwards with different spacing, I show you not your face, but your heart's desire. So this is the first time Harry has gotten even a look at his parents. In the book, he sees not only them in the mirror, but his whole family lineage, like people he assumes are his uncles and grandparents. But that's always a little weird because, you know, not everyone in his family died before their time, as far as we knew. So I think it was a good decision on the film's part to just have this moment be between just Harry and an image of his mom and dad. We can also deduce from the fact that Harry sees his whole lineage that that would date back to the Peverell brothers, since Harry is implied to be descended from them. This leads to Harry's first moment with Albus Dumbledore, and Dumbledore drops this wonderful line.
It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.
The way Richard Harris delivers this, you can sense a very real sense of regret in the character, that he too probably lost years of his life standing in front of this mirror. So it informs his answer to Harry's question about what he sees, as Dumbledore responds, himself with a pair of woolen socks. It's a pretty fun joke, but it was long theorized that those socks could have had something to do with his dead sister Ariana. Like perhaps they were a gift that she knitted for him by hand without magic. Actually, J.K. Rowling later said in a web chat that Albus really saw his full family reunited. Ariana Anna, Kendra, Aberforth, all together. So they're sitting around eating some chocolate frogs, and they revisit the Albus Dumbledore card, which in the book is fully read on the train, but they didn't want to give us the name of Nicholas Flamel that early in the movie, so the frog was covering it before. Now they read it as Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts, considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times. Professor Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1943, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling. Grindelwald actually shows up in part 1 of the Deathly Hallows, and his relationship with Dumbledore is explored more in the Fantastic Beasts films. This leads to all of them researching in the library, Hermione finding this history book entry on Nicholas Flamel. Now, fun detail here, the production actually created 2 different book pages, one with Philosopher's Stone written there, and one with Sorcerer's Stone written there for the different versions of the movie. Now, the next section of the movie varies a bit from the book. Indeed, in the film's shooting script, you can see a ton of omitted scenes on these pages. In the book, Harry and Hermione help smuggle Norbert, the dragon, out of the castle so Hagrid doesn't get into trouble. A Malfoy overhears them plotting and goes to catch them in the act, that snitch, and Neville tries to warn them. So it's actually Malfoy, Neville, Harry, and Hermione who have to go into the dark forest for their detention. Ron is in the hospital because Norbert bit him, and apparently his bite is poison. Neville, having to serve detention, sets up why he tries to stop the others from leaving the dormitory in the 3rd act. But in the movie, it's justified by Neville just not wanting Gryffindor to lose more points. And it makes the house point numbers a much bigger deal in the final part of this movie, but it ends up leading to a really heartfelt thing that matters to kids watching this story that I'll get to later. But we do get this little meta moment when Hagrid is playing the Harry Potter theme song on his wooden flute.
Hagrid.
And Harry is so close to putting everything together, but is still hung up on Snape being the bad guy.
That was no stranger Hagrid met in the village. It was Snape, which means he knows how to get past Fluffy.
When Snape stalks away from them, they purposely make his movements similar to the creature that Harry saw feeding on the unicorn in the forest.
Get the shit out of me.
And that's just a red herring to make the viewer think that Snape is definitely the villain. So Harry, Ron, and Hermione go in search of the Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone in the castle, and this is where Chris Columbus really shines. The whole sequence of them getting past the magical traps and using their wits to outsmart the bad guy is very Home Alone. Each one gets a chance to show off what they've got. After they just barely make it past Fluffy, Hermione uses her book smarts to get them past the Devil's Snare plant. Harry uses his seeker skills to find and catch the correct enchanted key to unlock the door, knowing that it would be the one with the broken wing, because that would be the one grabbed aggressively before. And Ron uses his chess skills to win a life-size game of wizard's chess. I love the wizard chess scene. Ron hops on the horseback to be the knight, Harry plays the bishop, and Hermione the queenside rook. And I always read too much into this, like Harry, the bishop, who can only move diagonally. A detail that we'll get into in Chamber of Secrets that, you know, I always just have a lot of fun with, because mispronouncing Diagon Alley shouldn't send you to Nocturne Alley. It should make you move just like diagonally forever and ever. That's the way I see it. Meanwhile, Hermione playing the rook, someone who can only see forward or directly to her side, but it's just such a square. She only moves at 90-degree angles, right? And of course, Ron plays the knight, which is like the coolest piece, the most powerful and the most effective piece in any game of chess, and the one that hurts the most to lose. So in this match, White opens with a pawn to e4, which is a very common opening, and Ron answers with pawn to d5 to sacrifice it and test out whether this is going to be played like actual wizard's chess with the pieces destroying one another. Pretty stupid move on Ron's part, because it basically means he's starting out down a pawn. Like, he could have just waited until a piece got taken normally to scope out the deal. Toward the end of this violent game, Ron sacrifices himself to win, proving that he does belong in Gryffindor with the rest of the courageous students. It's not just because he has red hair like all of his older brothers. He himself is courageous and crazy. Hermione stays behind to look after Ron, and Harry goes it alone. So the chess sequence was both Chris Columbus and Rupert Grint's favorite scene to shoot. Columbus was in love with the set and the look of the pieces. Grint was excited that he got to ride a horse chess piece and sacrifice himself in a big moment. In the book, several of the main Hogwarts employees and professors contribute to the things protecting the Sorcerer's Stone. So Fluffy was placed there by Hagrid. The Devil's Snare was the work of Professor Sprout, the herbology teacher. The flying keys were from Professor Flitwick, the charms teacher, and the chessboard was McGonagall's doing. Also in the book, Hermione goes with Harry, and there are 2 other challenges that they don't show here in the movie. One is a troll, although it's already knocked out cold when Harry and Hermione encounter it. That is what Professor Quirrell contributed, and that sets up how he had control over the troll. And the other was thought up by Professor Snape, a room with 7 bottles containing liquids. 2 bottles contain wine, 3 contain poison, and 1 that lets the drinker back out of the room to safety, and another that lets the drinker advance to the next room. Reading this in the book, I love this challenge because it's kind of like, a logic puzzle they might take on like a high school exam. Harry and Hermione solve the logic riddle to figure out which is which. Hermione goes back while Harry goes forward. So Harry arrives at the final chamber, and we get the big reveal that it has not been Snape that's been after the Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone, but Quirrell. Well, Quirrell with Voldemort growing out the back of his head. Quirrell walks through every instance when Harry got it wrong about him, the Quidditch match, the troll in the school, and he even reveals that Snape was the one trying to stop Quirrell this whole time. After Voldemort tried to kill Harry, he went into hiding in Albania and was badly wounded. The only reason he wasn't killed was because he had split his soul and put pieces of it in different objects, which becomes a major plot point in later films with the Horcruxes. Quirrell was studying abroad, and Voldemort, sensing that he was vulnerable, corrupted him and attached himself to Quirrell. In the Mirror of Erised, Harry sees that the Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone, is now in his own pocket. A cool little bit of magic that Dumbledore explains later is because only a person who wanted to find the stone but not use it could get it. Voldemort wants the stone so that he can stop living off the unicorn blood and attach to Quirrell like a parasite and get his own body back. Voldemort's voice here is performed by actor Richard Bremer, who is listed in the credits of the film as He Who Must Not Be Named. This is before they cast the actor Ralph Fiennes in the role. Voldemort tries every trick in the villain's handbook to get the stone: bribery, threats, promises of power, telling Harry that he can be with his parents again. And finally, when nothing works, he orders Quirrell to kill him. But the magic of Harry's mother's sacrifice still lives in his skin, so just touching his skin causes Quirrell and Voldemort to disintegrate. Then a big Voldemort fart cloud attacks Harry and flees, and Harry wakes up in the hospital wing. Dumbledore explains that the stone has been destroyed, but there are other ways that Voldemort might come back. Then he eats a Birdie Spots every flavor bean that turns out to be, alas, earwax, which is a real flavor of these beans, since they actually manufactured these after the movie came out, and it is, alas, disgusting. So is the vomit flavored one that he talks about. But everyone should at least try it, at least once. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are awarded points for their heroism, and so is Neville for standing up to them and trying to prevent them from sneaking out.
It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to your enemies, but a great deal more to stand up to your friends.
And Gryffindor wins the House Cup. Slytherin is pissed because they were in the lead until those extra points were handed out. Seemed a little unfair, I would say. And I would imagine even the kids in Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff were like, I get it if Slytherin wanted to stop the count there. But this House Cup drama is presented as a much bigger deal in the book because Harry screwing around with Norbert puts Gryffindor way behind in points. And everyone at Gryffindor is mad at Harry as the year comes to an end. That's what the Neville edition in the movie was really embodying. Otherwise, the film doesn't spend that much time on it. But it is a big deal for Harry because think about it, Hogwarts is the only place he's felt at home. So when he becomes a pariah around Gryffindor, it hurts him more than it would hurt other kids like Malfoy, who can afford to make enemies and then go home to the loving embrace of his parents. So while it seems like an oddly big deal for the film to have this additional climax, or maybe something that would only matter to kids watching, it's actually a critical gift by Dumbledore to remind everyone at the school why they should be grateful for Harry and Ron and Hermione and Neville, because Neville, like Harry, doesn't have the best summer ahead of him. I expect a few visits to St. Mungo's with the parents who are tortured to the point of insanity. So this win is really a gift from the headmaster that these sad children can ride high on until September. But the best gift of all, Hagrid gives Harry an album of photos of Harry as a baby with his mother and father. In the book, it's revealed that he called around to all of James and Lily's friends to gather the pictures. It is so sweet. Harry no longer needs the Mirror of Erised. He could just look at this photograph. Everyone heads home for summer break. This was actually the first scene that they shot, and in it, Daniel Radcliffe is wearing contacts to make his eyes green. Lily's eyes. But he was allergic to these contacts and he kept tearing up, so they stopped using them after that first day. But when he's tearing up at the end, Columbus said that you could tell his eyes are a little swollen from the allergic reaction. Similarly, they initially had Emma Watson wear fake teeth, since in the book, Hermione has buck teeth, but they didn't like it after seeing the dailies and removed the teeth. They cut around it in the final cut of the film, but they can still be made out if you look close enough at Emma Watson here. As the train pulls away from Hogsmeade, Hermione says that it feels strange to be going home. For her, returning to the true Muggle world with dentist parents would probably feel strange after everything she's gone through, but Harry responds,
I'm not going home.
Not really.
Not really.
It's a more thematic ending to how the book ends. Book ends with Harry meeting the Dursleys back at the King's Cross station and making a quip about how he plans to further torture Pigtail Dudley all summer. But here, Harry is acknowledging acknowledging that Hogwarts is really now his home. Privet Drive is no longer his home. He was the boy who lived. Now he's a boy who knows how fulfilling that gift of life can be. And this idea of not being able to go home, not really, I think applies to those of us who revisit these films. It's often said that you can't go home again because, you know, you just change too much for home to ever really feel like home. That's how I feel when I rewatch these films. They don't hit exactly as they did when I was a kid. I just know too much about the world, too much about this fandom, too much about what J.K. Rowling has done with the privilege that the sales and royalties of these books have afforded her. But I think that maturity, that inability to go back to the home of our youths is actually in its own way a gift. Home should not be a fixed constant in our lives. It should evolve to whatever we need in the present of our lives. So as we go back to all 8 of these films, yeah, they should feel differently. We should revisit them with the context of what J.K. Rowling has done. And this isn't to take away any of the talent and the creation of J.K. Rowling's writing. These books and these films and these joys would not exist without her. But when we revisit these films, it should not feel like an infantilizing homecoming that makes us feel like children again. We should acknowledge how we've changed, how the world has changed, and apply it in that context to these films. Okay, so we know there is a Harry Potter TV series coming to HBO and Max in 2026. And I think that context is going to be very, very important to apply. Chairman and CEO of HBO and Max, Casey Bloys, promises that this series will dive deep into each of the iconic books that fans have continued to enjoy for all these years, and that it will be a faithful adaptation. So at the end of each of these breakdowns, we're gonna go into some of the iconic stuff that they need to include, that they are required to include in the TV show so that they can really improve upon what the film's built. And we're gonna do this in a segment we are calling Room of Requirement. And in this week's Room of Requirement, we're gonna look specifically at what will be the first season of the show based on Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone. So first requirement, if each season of the show corresponds to one book, season 1 needs to keep the original title of book 1, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. It was changed for American audiences, and there's a rumor that book publisher Scholastic did this because they felt that the term philosopher was considered too archaic for American children, and putting the word sorcerer in there would make it sell more copies. But I think we're past that now. Rowling never wanted it changed, but she didn't think she had enough sway as the author to force them to keep it. So, you know, she caved. And I think it's time that we just trust American viewers and change it back to Philosopher's Stone. Okay, next thing, we need to bring back that magical score. John Williams is at least a third of the reason why these films were as successful as they were. At this point, the man is probably too busy or too old to do an entire TV series, but the film's score was never better than when Williams was in charge. Use his work in the movie as an inspiration for the show. Look at what The Rings of Power did. They let Howard Shore do the main theme that played over the credits, and then they took another very talented composer, Bear McCreary, to compose the rest of the amazing music in Shore's style. So I think this Harry Potter series could take a similar approach. Whatever composer you bring in, it should evoke John Williams themes. Okay, third item, let's spend some more time early on with the odious Dursleys. Harry's life changes in an instant when he finds out he's a wizard, but his life before that honestly sucked. And the film just couldn't spend as much time exploring that relationship as they do in the book, but this would also be a good way to establish other interesting tidbits about the neighborhood, like the neighbor Mrs. Fig, before she would end up playing a much bigger role in Order of the Phoenix. We could also establish just more details about the wizard world and kind of do what like Tolkien's prologue had in the Fellowship of the Ring extended edition concerning hobbits. There should be like a concerning Privet Drive sequence or like concerning muggles. Okay, next item, we need to keep Dumbledore whimsical. In the books, he often just says nonsense for no real reason. And I will say the first film does hint at this when Dumbledore just says a few nonsense words in his opening remarks in the Great Hall. But he's supposed to really just be odd and silly and very powerful. And that's what made readers fall in love with him. Nothing against what Richard Harris did with the character. I really love what he did with the character. But there is like another element to Dumbledore, especially in the earlier books, that I think the early seasons of this series can dig into more. Like Rowling named him Dumbledore because she imagined him kind of zigzagging around the Hogwarts corridors, humming to himself like a bumblebee. Okay, next item, bring back Peeves the Poltergeist. Justice for Peeves. You cannot do this show and keep omitting Peeves. Okay, next, we need to put Snape's poison challenge back into the climax of the film. I want to watch these kids work out a logic puzzle and drink what might or might not kill them. That's a very cool scene in the book that needs to be in the show. And finally, it's season 1. We can introduce and explore some more of the mythology earlier on. I mean, book 1 doesn't really have any of it because Rowling hadn't thought of it yet. But now that we know it's going to be part of this world, you can do all kinds of teasing. You can tease the Horcruxes. You can tease Deathly Hallows. Like maybe have one of the kids at the school just kind of joking around the story of the 3 brothers. You can hint at some of the prophecy, especially with Neville Neville. You can make him a much bigger character earlier on. Talk about some of the international schools like Beauxbatons or Drumstrong. Some of the American schools, you could have details of Dumbledore maybe looking at a picture of his sister Ariana. However, I am begging, please, we don't need any tie-ins to the Fantastic Beasts movies or to the play Cursed Child. And let's not overuse time turners. Let's be very careful how we use time turners on this show. Okay, next up in our rewatch series is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, another Christopher Columbus installment that started filming just days after Sorcerer's Stone, Philosopher's Stone came out. We want to shout out Morgan Ross at Movie Flame, who gave us a shout out when he did his Harry Potter breakdown series. Thanks, Morgan, and good job on your work. A huge thanks to Gina Ippolito for doing all the research and the writing for this breakdown. Comment down below with your thoughts. Follow.
So yeah, this was absolutely great for me. I absolutely love this. You know, it's such a great nostalgia trip for me, especially since I love that movie. And yeah, I love that I'm actually wearing my Gryffindor hat. So, you know, just was so prepared for it. Next is gonna be one of my favorite Harry Potter movies. It's actually my third favorite. Well, I'll be revealing which are my favorites, but this one is probably the fifth favorite, maybe. Yeah, just around 5. But yeah, I could probably do a top 10 list. I should, maybe. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. But anyway, not top 10 list, but top 8 Harry Potter movies. But anyway, I love this and I can't wait to see more. And remember, please smash that like button if you want to see more sexy and nerdy content, and subscribe. And remember, sign up for my Patreon for all my latest reactions to all my latest videos. I'll see you in the next episode.